So, welcome to this session of Speak Your Mind by Climobilize. And my guest for this session is Minou Schillings. Minou, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This sounds like a really interesting thing to go for. Speak your mind is something that we should do a lot more in this world.
Absolutely. There's so much that needs to be discussed and talked about, and so much to be acted upon. So, Minou is going to be speaking about the topic of why has declaring climate emergencies failed to create meaningful change? And Minou, if it's okay with you, I'd like to open up with the question of why do you think that fear and doom and gloom fail to mobilize people to take action?
Of course, yeah. Um, it's actually pretty straightforward. It was straightforward if you think about it. Fear and doom and gloom, like the fear approach, the fear spark that your brain gives, normally doesn't last that long. If a tiger approaches you, you start running. If water rises, you start running. If you're hungry, you start acting. But that's always something that, like, you're fear for something that has happening now, which you can act upon right now. And then the fear goes away because the situation changes. What we're seeing right now is that, like, I am sitting now in a well isolated, warm house with a full fridge. Um, I have opportunities to mobilize. I'm not afraid for what brings tomorrow or even the next day, but I still actively need to change the way that I live, the decisions I make, what I'm doing. And that just like, I'm not actually physically right now afraid of something right in front of my eyes. I'm afraid for people in other places in the world. I'm afraid for next generations. I'm afraid for other species. But all of that requires active compassion. And active compassion requires time and energy and headspace. And not everybody has that time and energy and headspace. So if you're busy living your life and you have to worry about putting food on the table, taking care of your kids, just basically the rat race, then there isn't always the time for active compassion. And then fear just doesn't hit home. What could hit home, I believe, is a collective vision of a better future, is imagination. Because working towards something, working towards a goal or a vision or a better future or something that you're really excited about, that can actually drive you for a longer period of time. And then you can also start collaborating. You can start envisioning. You can start having clear goals that will bring you closer and closer and closer. So this active imagination is something that drives you. Pure fear might for a little bit, but it will fizzle out. We have seen it through COVID and we've seen it through wars and through many different situations. Humans quite fast get used to really absurd situations because they haven't killed us one day and the next day and the next day and the next day. And what some way you get incentivized, you get numbed. And it's easy to get numbed in a world where we already get 3,000 marketing messages per day bombarded at us. And on top of that, all social media, TV, news, everything. So what we do to survive is simply fade out. We numb, we disconnect. And then the fear goes away and also our motivation to change something. But if there is something that you can dream about, that sticks. It's just so much stronger. You can already see it, I think, best. I think you should always look at kids and how to motivate kids and how kids go about things. If you ask a kid what they're working on and what they're excited about or what they want to change in the world, it isn't fear driven. It's always hope driven. It's dream driven. It's superheroes. It's want to be a firefighter or like, and that's not because they're afraid of fires, but that's because they have a vision for themselves to make the world a better place or to save other people. It's hope, not fear. And I think that's why all of this like fear and doom mongering and doom and gloom thinking doesn't work. Not only because fear doesn't work, but also because we've made it purely statistic driven. And honestly, I don't know, but I have never been emotionally really invested in a fairy tale or a folklore or a song that was built around statistics. No. Things that move us are built around stories. They're built around um, art, around deeply fundamental things that make us a living being, that make us compassionate. Uh, and it, like all the carbon talks have only been about statistics. I can't even put like make sense of those statistics. And I'm a sustainability professional. So imagine what to do with those statistics if you're not living and dreaming, like living and talking about sustainability and regeneration all day, every day. But if you're just doing your day-to-day job, and then in the news they throw statistics at you, yeah, what is that gonna do?
Interesting. So it comes back to storying. It comes back to stories, turning those statistics into stories that people can actually connect with, but in a positive way is what you're saying, because the scaring only it's of transient nature. It passes as the catastrophe passes, or once we get used to the new circumstances.
I
But the
mean,
vision is that's what keeps driving us over the long term.
you've seen it last summer. We had a summer full of things like floods and storms and fires and all of that. And it it's sort of really captured our whole summer in like big parts of the world. It was everything that the news was talking about. And now we're moving towards the next summer. And what are people doing? Booking flights to get to exactly those places where it all went down last summer because we're flying too much, because the way that we're living. So it's just, we already forgot. We forgot that our decisions lead directly, like that it's a direct loop. But you move on, and so much is happening that by the time you move to your next summer, you're back to just like going about it in the way that you've always done, because fear doesn't work. What does work is helping people to envision different ways that they, for example, could spend their summer, different dreams that they could have, different ways to relax, like that. It doesn't always mean fly to a far away destination and spend your summer at a pool. It could be something completely different, but it needs to be personal what that different could be, and not just we fly too much. But no, okay, you to a specific person. Okay, you like water, or you like diving, or cooking, or like there's always something. There's always a personal angle, and that's what we've been missing. Like it's been too much of a mainstream, generic conversation. Whereas I think that most of us living in this world feel that there is something fundamentally wrong, and also feel uncomfortable with being put in boxes and being smacked down by the educational system and only being taught to become like a productive citizen in a capitalistic system in the way that is envisioned. But that doesn't work for everybody. It's again, it's something personal that might work. So for some people, that vision might be of whatever example would love, like regenerative communities where you live collectively and where you work actively and together, and it's land oriented and soil oriented. For others, it might be more around raising kids collectively, or it might be around art or sports or any of those things. Like there's so many different visions, and those make people tick and help them to like become active over a longer period of time and connect to their essence. And I think that's what is been missing. There's no essence in these stories. in the statistics, in the fear. It's all just collective humanity and big numbers that fear us for like a week. It's not something that you as Ian or me as Minou dream about to such an extent that we simply can't let it go. And that's what we want to realize. And we want to find the people that we can realize that better future with, that better and personal future with. And I think it's our responsibility, or our opportunity, better said, to help people to start exploring these better futures and start understanding that it's up to them to take ownership, but it's also up to them to, yeah, to create this vision. Governments are not going to do it for us. Governments are going to create visions to run countries in more sustainable manners. But the smaller personal ways of us living together, that's what we need to do. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to put like all the work at the citizens and consumers. That's another story. But I do think it's our work to refine our, yeah, our imagination.
Interesting. It seems that a recurring theme that I hear also from other speakers who've also addressed the same question is the issue is with the scale and scope, meaning it's too overarching, and from their perspective, at least, and it seems that you're saying the same thing, and you're taking it even one step further. They're saying, let's make it more localized. Let's make it more community focused. You're saying it goes even beyond that. It needs to be not just community focused and localized, it needs to be personalized. It needs to be at the individual level. And then we create that passion, we create that story, and that's what then motivates us. And that then is how we start, you know, that for you is why these top level, regionally oriented or country focused or whatever it is, these declarations
Mm-hmm.
have failed to have effect. So I'd like to actually follow up on that positive sense. You know, you're saying let's get out of the negative and let's talk positive. Let's get away from the data and start talking personal stories. For you, what excites you the most about the transition that we're currently living through? You know, that is the purpose of declaring the climate emergency, but they want to do that through the doom and gloom and the fear. You're saying, no, let's make it positive. So what excites you? Let's
A
hear
lot,
Minou's.
a lot of different things excite me about this. Like in the beginning, I think what sits the deepest is that ever since I was young, um, people always want to ask like, why is it this way or why are we doing that way? It was just like, it's because it's tradition or because it's done like that, because that's just how the world works. And um, the world didn't really seem to work to me, or it really doesn't. And a lot of things don't make sense, and a lot of traditions should be reconsidered or reimagined. And it just, I was always very confused about all of that. And I think declaring climate emergencies and understanding that we need to change fundamentally, and maybe I'm a bit of an oddball here because in general, people fear change. I kind of thrive by it. I love igniting it. And I think it's super exciting. I think it's super exciting that we finally can start reimagining and rebuilding all of these ways of living and ways of doing that make absolutely no sense to me. Like the way that we live together makes no sense. The way that we think what success means makes no sense to me. The way that we're eating, the way that we're growing old, the way that we work till we're 65 or 67 and then retire and start enjoying our life whilst our bodies are tired. Like there's so much that is just fundamentally odd that it excites me a lot that we can start changing those things and thinking about ways that we could live together, thinking about raising kids collectively or community life or more local connections or connecting to your own essence and connecting to your community and just going back to what it actually is to be a living being that is connected with like yourself and the world around you and other species. I think it just puts everything way more at ease and makes us also more fundamentally happy. And there's this movement that I'm working on. It's the regenerative marketing movement. We're saying that marketing is the one driver of overconsumption and overproduction. It's like one of the main reasons that people consume and produce too much. But it also has that power to drive change, to ignite movements, because in the purest form, it's creativity, it's imagination, it's storytelling, it's exactly what we need to create a better world. And we've been thinking, okay, well, like what is missing in a lot of businesses and in a lot of communities um, that makes us sort of move in the business as usual direction every time, even though that we set out to do something different. And that is that we lose the connection to our essence. And I already mentioned essence a bit. And you said like some people would say, like, let's go more community and local oriented. And I say individual. And I actually say it's both. And I see it more as like an infinity loop, where you have an infinity loop of the community that you're a part of and an infinity loop of yourself. And this the infinity loop is a loop of self-development and realization and awareness and understanding and all of these unlearning as well. And both at both of the core of these loops, it's essence. And I think what we need to do is constantly reevaluate, reimagine what we're doing, but return to our essence and do the same with community. And as long as the essence of yourself and the essence of your community or your business overlap, then you're good to go. And you're really, really igniting change. When they start like moving apart, then perhaps you're working on something or you're a part of something that just doesn't really move you, doesn't really connect with you. And that might lead you to like be either overstimulated, understimulated, burned out, feeling that you're part of a rat race that is relatively empty because you lost that core. And for everyone, that essence connection is different. I think for you, it might be sports. And for me, it might be arts and like it can be a lot of different things. For some, it's food. Um, and it's that constant returning there that I think can be really, really powerful. So make this climate emergency, make it personal and help people understand that personal doesn't mean just you, because there's nothing in the world, nothing in the world that only one person likes. Like you can have the craziest of crazy thoughts. Someone already thought that. And in the world that we're living in today, you can find that person and actively work towards something. And I think that's what we've been missing in climate communication so far.
Interesting. So you're saying that despite your recommendation, quote unquote, to think at the personal level, to become emotionally engaged and aware with it, you're saying today we can also use technology to start creating communities of like-minded people who are who share those same individual level passions as the way to go forward. Um, so, Minou, I want to ask you as we come to the end of this, I want to ask you, if there's one thought that you would like to leave the audience with. You've already left me with several, which are very interesting. But if there's one that you would like to leave the rest of the audience with, what would you like that to be?
Mhm. There's so many one. There's so many. I think I'm gonna go with my favorite one. It's a quote actually by Edward de Bono. It's a lateral thinking academic, and he said something that struck me, and it always stayed with me. It's like if you never change your mind, why have one? And I think that's exactly what we all need to realize. If you're gonna just stick to the static, do what you always have done, and believe what you always have believed, then things are gonna stay the same. But why have a mind that way? We have this super, super, super interesting thing here in our skull. And the most interesting thing we can do with it is see how far it can go, see in which directions you can take it in. It can do incredible, incredible things. And we discussed this like a bit before we hit record, this absurd startup that now started to move glacier ice from Greenland to the UIA. to put in people's cocktails. Like someone's mind went there. Imagine what we could do with all of that brain potential to actually make that happen, but then put it in a different direction. Put it into like regeneration for all, put it into a future that is actually livable and exciting and thriving because the capacities, the things that we can think of, the things that we can imagine up, the things that we can collectively be excited about because we share many, many stories in this world that are just absolutely made up. Democracy, for example, being one of them. It's just a story. If you think of that, then changing your mind goes very, very far. It means changing the world.
And like you said, it starts with the very simple question that that small kids ask all the time, right? That drives their parents crazy. Why? But
Why?
why? But
Why?
why?
Yeah,
Exactly.
but why? Yeah.
That's an interesting place to both start and also wrap this up. Very interesting. Mina, thank you again so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Um, lots to think about there, starting with that why, and after the why, we'll move on to the what and the how.
Mm-hmm.
So again, Minnow, thanks
Yeah,
so much.
no worries. Thank you as well.
Thanks. Bye.